Okay, once again, welcome to the Engage 2020 webinar, Engagement with Future of Responsible Research and Innovation. As it was said, we will please make sure that you have muted your microphone. Maybe you can finish. Well, welcome for all of you. Today we'll talk, as it was said, about the future of engagement, also where can you get support, and we'll have some Q&A in the end. Just a little bit first about Engage2020. Engage2020 is an FP7 project funded by the European Commission. The main aim of Engage2020 is to enhance societal engagement in Horizon 2020, both by mapping what is the current status of engagement, what kind of methods are used, what kind of policies and activities support engagement in research and innovation, but also looking at what could be improved in the future. How do we support engagement in research and innovation more in the future, and what kind of policies or activities or funding can support having better and more engagement in research and innovation in the future. The Engage 2020 consortium consists of 6 partners from Bulgaria, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands and the UK. The project will last about 2.5 years, and we're actually moving into our final month, so we're actually finishing the project now. So this is one of our last official activities in the project, but there are more things that will continue in the future, but we go back to that later on. Okay. Just to fit in. So just a little bit about what the project activities we've done in the Engage 2020. We've been looking at the projects, the prospects of engagement. We've been scanning the practices. We're looking at the future perspective, and we also looked at how does these connect to the different societal challenges. And some of the things that we've done, besides doing reports, we've done some policy briefs. We had some online tools that make it easy to find good ideas for what kind of methods you can use. And then we also had some workshops, and just had a conference 2 weeks ago in Brussels. So, what is engagement? Well, in the Engage 2020 project, we're working with the 4 levels of public engagement in research and innovation. Both these can be engagement at the policy formation level, which is making research policies or giving input to policies affecting research and innovation. There's the program level, where it is the research programs or work programs. How can you include engagement of civil society at this level? We also look at the project design level, which is how can you involve society in defining what a project should be about. This could, for example, be the design shop, it could be action research, and so on. And then we have the actual research and innovation activities or the projects, collecting data. This could, for example, be citizen science. So these are the 4 levels that we've worked with in the Engage 2020 project. We also, there's a lot of different actors that you can involve in as participants in engagement in Horizon 2020. Those that we have mostly focused on in the Engage 2020 project is CSOs, citizens affected, people that could be, for example, patients, consumers, employees, users, and others. So we're not focused that much on traditional stakeholder involvement or industry. And one of the things that, and one of the reasons why the Commission also has a lot of focus on engagement is it's one of the pillars one of the principles behind responsible research and innovation. It's there to contribute to scientific literacy society. It's and it's there to bring in different perspectives, bringing creativity to research and innovation process. It's also to make sure that research outcomes and projects are more socially relevant, so that the needs and wants of society are aligned better with research and innovation. So yeah, engagement is one of the pillars of one of the issues of responsible research and innovation, where, I mean, the principles are anticipation, reflexivity, inclusion, responsiveness, and in responsible research and innovation you also have issues regarding governance and ethics and so on, and engagement is one of these. So that was a very brief introduction to the Engage2020 project and engagement in research and innovation. So I'll give the word to Edward Anderson, who will speak a little bit more about what do we see in the future, some of the findings that we've found in the research and in the Engage2020 project.
Yes, thank you, Marie. It's excellent to be here. I very much enjoy talking about the future. But of course, it's very hard to predict the future. And when Alexander Graham Bell was asked when he invented the phone, of course some people say he didn't, wasn't the first person to invent it, but when he was asked, what do you do with this phone thing that you've just invented, his best suggestion was, well, maybe we can use it to send, to broadcast classical music to far-flung communities who don't have orchestras. So even he didn't know what this new revolutionary thing was going to do, and so maybe it can be hard to predict the future. Well, we're going to now look at the very practical side of responsible research and innovation. Often it gets very abstract. We're going to look at the actual methods that scientists and policymakers can use and indeed are using across Europe. And this is based on some work we did over the past 2 years, which involved 2 expert workshops, a series of webinars, and a lot of by basically talking to a lot of experts and reflecting what do we currently see and what are some of the key developments that are affecting engagement in the future. So there's a lot of research which has gone into these findings, and I hope you find them useful. And at the end we'll have questions and answers, and we're very interested to hear what you think about these questions. So the first thing to say about public engagement is, of course, that while we often refer to it as an innovative area, and for many people in research and innovation especially it is new, it's actually not that new. Europe has been a pioneer. I'm sitting here at the Danish Board of Technology, which invented consensus conferences. Down in Germany, the planning cells were invented in the 60s. 70s, so the methods have been developed at least since the 60s. I think we can safely say we've seen large-scale uptake in certain countries and in certain contexts since the 90s. Over the last few decades, institutionalization of public engagement has been growing. So we've seen government departments supporting this way of working. We've seen ministers embracing it, and we've seen support organizations popping up in countries from Switzerland, the UK, Denmark, all across parts of Europe. And of course, let's not forget, this session is of course about responsible research and innovation. It is about science and technology, but there is a lot of public engagement which is happening beyond the confines of research and innovation. So that's just to give you a sense. This is a field with a history and a lot of practice. And if we talk about the fields of practice, so we've just lost the PowerPoint again, but I think it's important to say that there are several distinct fields of practice. We have science shops and those kind of participatory research. We have various forms of technology assessment, which clearly the Danish Board of Technology has been leading on, TA Swiss, many others. which have used deliberative methods to try and explore issues around science policy and science communication. So all of these key areas are important. We've got user involvement, of course. Let's not forget. I mean, engagement, as Marie-Louise pointed to, is a very broad concept. It covers many, many fields. And what are we seeing if we look at the recent developments? Well, we can see that engagement, it's unevenly distributed across Europe. It's by no means present in all contexts, but it is growing. And you can argue that it's growing across the board, largely thanks to the efforts of the European Commission to promote it. We are seeing a large growth, for example, in citizen science, and in particular online citizen science. This is a field which has really taken off over the last few years and has become very active with portals like Zooniverse. We can see that science shops, through the Living Knowledge Networks and others, this concept has started to spread across Europe to countries where it hasn't existed before. We can see increasing efforts to institutionalize public engagement in various countries. We can see that at the European level there is an interest in deliberative methods, which previously wasn't there. And we can also see that there's an increase in the scale of deliberative methods. So whereas 20 years ago maybe you could only engage 100 people in a deliberative method, nowadays we've seen processes where several thousand people have been engaged at the same time. And also importantly, I think we are seeing a growth of transboundary participation. So that would be things like, this would be things like the worldwide views, which is recently happened around global warming again. These are large-scale deliberative processes which cross boundaries, work in several countries at the same time. So engagement is no longer something which is done locally or nationally. It is now truly happening at an international level as well. So those are good developments. We're also seeing some quite dangerous pressures put on public engagement. No surprise there due to the costs. The recession, there are pressures to cut costs, to do engagement quicker, to get better quality results. Policymakers want more for their money, and to increase the number of participants involved. And sometimes these pressures can be quite negative because they don't necessarily play to the strengths of all kinds of engagement. So we have deliberative methods which involve quite small numbers but give you high quality insight. So those are some of the things, and if you have questions about anything coming up here, do make sure you write them in the chat and we can come back to them later. So some of the findings, what did we find when we looked at the future of engagement? Well, the first finding, and perhaps this is quite interesting for a process which focused specifically on methodological innovations, is perhaps the biggest challenge we face today. The biggest challenge is not that we don't have enough methods. When we did the Engage2020 action catalog, we discovered 57 methods, and there are many more, I think, out there as well. We have a lot of methods. Our toolbox is very full. So the big challenge isn't that there aren't any methods to use. There's plenty of methods that you could use. But the development will rather be in developing new methods which fill a particular niche, blending methods or using methods in new contexts. So perhaps bringing deliberation into the academic research context, bringing a science shop online, expanding citizen science to include citizens, their involvement into the issue of setting the research questions. So there's lots of exciting stuff to happen, but I think the key challenge isn't necessarily developing a new method. It's actually using and combining the tools we already have in more in creative ways. So that's one thing we've reached a conclusion that we'll need more methods in the future, but that's not the key challenge. When it comes to deliberative engagement, it's a very interesting field. It's, as I said, has quite a history, and it's been very successful. But it's been very successful in particular niche fields. It's not widely known outside of, say, technology assessment or other areas where it has become widely used. Deliberative engagement is also seen as quite expensive and time-consuming, which limits its use. And there is a push for more digital deliberation online, which I don't necessarily think it's not a good thing necessarily. Deliberation is a process which is very difficult to do online. It requires a lot of those face-to-face modalities, the subtle interactions, and simply moving it online to reduce costs is not going to be good value for money. There's another push for distributed deliberation. And one way of dealing with the costs of the process is, of course, to ask civil society organizations, citizens themselves, to host their own events. And that's something that a number of people have tried, but there are challenges. It's not easy to motivate people to do it. And of course, you lose some of the control over the process. And another key weakness that we uncovered around deliberative engagement is that it's a method which could be very useful in academic research, but it's not widely used or understood there. So this, I think, is a field which needs to network more with other across boundaries, and there's a lot of growth potential around deliberative engagement. We've also looked at digital. Now, obviously, digital technologies are changing all aspects of our lives. So clearly, engagement is not immune. I think one of the biggest effects has, of course, been on citizen science, where a lot of activities are happening online today. But for many reasons, I think digital engagement is unlikely to replace face-to-face engagement. There are a lot of things that face-to-face engagement provides, in terms of ownership, in terms of increased trust, in terms of that high-quality face-to-face interaction, which are difficult, if not impossible, to replicate online. So I think we need to be realistic about our expectations on digital. Digital is great for bringing together large numbers of people. It's great for bringing together people across very wide geographical areas, or people who simply cannot meet at the same time because they don't have time available at the same time. It's a great way of pooling very small amounts of time from many people, as we've seen with Zooniverse. And there are really interested ways of using digital technologies in face-to-face meetings, maybe before an event, to distribute information and encourage discussion, during the event, to enhance the discussion, or after the event, by making sure that the participants can continue to network. So I think this will be a very exciting space to watch, but not necessarily as a replacement for face-to-face engagement, but as something which adds to it. And then we also have this area of participative research, the active participation in the research process. There's a number of fields here. We have citizen science, which I've already mentioned. We have the science shops with the multiple, where academics and CSOs and citizens work together to identify useful research questions. We have action research. And I think one of the key findings we uncovered in this work was that there really needs to be more sharing and more collaboration here. And to talk more about that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Henk Mulder at the University of Groningen, who has worked with us a lot in this project as part of the consortium, and has a lot more to say on this topic. So, Henk?
Thank you, Edward. I hope you can hear me.
Can indeed.
Okay. Yeah, so one of the things that has always fascinated me is that we all started to do engagement from different motivations, and science shops typically started from the democratic motive. So we wanted to do research for civil society organizations, to give them access to the research capacity of universities mostly. And then we got into contact with people who were organizing science festivals, science events, science cafes, and it turned out they had a totally different motivation. They wanted to stimulate people to take up engineering studies, or wanted to just show the beauty of science, and so they mostly had cultural motives, sometimes economic motives to do this work. But we've grown a bit more together, and we found out that we share quite a lot in our motivation, actually. And also we found out that we do complementary work. So if you have a dialogue like a science cafe, there's no strings attached usually. But you could also use a science cafe after the discussion just to ask the people, well, we've gathered here together, we've been discussing this scientific topic. What do we agree that we don't know yet, but is still important to know? And then you can try to set up a small research to find out. So and that's actually what science shops do. So where science shops are very good in doing research for society, people doing citizen science are very good in doing research with society. You could combine the two, and then you have like participatory action research or even community-based participatory action research. So if you unite, there's a lot more people in the same type of work, and you can learn quite a lot from each other, and you can even create synergies. And if you take all of this together, what you will build is like a responsive science system. And that's, I think, what's the core of responsible research and innovation, building a science system that is responsive, open to the needs and views of civil society. So that's where I think engagement fits in with the RRI agenda and the whole idea of open innovation, open science that's open to the world. So I think time considering, I'll leave it at this. But if there's more questions about any of these activities like science shops, I'll be happy to speak about that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Henk. That's great. I mean, and this is one of the most fascinating things in doing this in this research was that we found that it's not necessarily single methods that are needed, but actually the combination, that actually combining science shops with citizen science and other approaches yields results which are much bigger than the sum of the parts. And one of the interesting things we also discovered is that it was very difficult to separate the kind of recommendations and innovations that are needed when it comes to methodology with the recommendations and innovations that are needed around the policy and the institutions that are doing the engagement. And those two really go hand in hand. And once again, I'm going to plug tomorrow's webinar, which will talk more about the policy side of things. But I think alongside these methodological innovations, we also need to see changes in the way that organizations work. And also, very importantly, we need to start working more across our communities of practice. We have these very well developed communities of science shops, living knowledge network, of citizen science, of technology assessment, of user engagement, and they need to work together. We have these vibrant communities which rarely interact despite really valuable learning which can happen. And so really what we talk about this is sort of moving from the focus of individual methods, which has perhaps been our focus the last decade as we've tried to get engagement to happen as part of responsible research and innovation, towards an engagement system, a more systematic way of looking at it, which focuses perhaps less on individual methods, individual projects, and more on the decision-making and research cycle. As part of the institutionalization, so this becomes not an extra, not a pilot, not something which is done on the outside, but something which is part of the organization's everyday activity, and mainstreaming so that this ceases to be a specialist competency, but becomes more of which reaches more people in their daily work. So make sure you tune in to tomorrow's webinar, same time, same place, but obviously tomorrow, where we'll be talking about the institutionalization of these issues. Because I really think that the methods and the policy innovations really do go hand in hand. So we've identified a number of recommendations for what the EU needs to do, what the EC needs to do, what universities and national research funders need to do to encourage these methodological innovations. We need to have continued programs to support new approaches. It's great to see that some of the more established methods are being used a lot, but we also do need to have ways of encouraging innovation. There needs to be long-term evaluation, because any form of innovation means that we'll fail sometimes. Things won't work out as expected, and if that's the case, then we need to make sure that we have routes for finding out what doesn't work, so we can start to focus our efforts on what does work. A key challenge for engagement is, of course, that a lot of engagement happens, but we know that just because you do a good engagement event, it doesn't mean that it has a big impact. Oftentimes the results, the research, whatever it yields, doesn't get used properly. So I think another recommendation is to create a database, a way of finding, searching results, so that we don't keep asking the same questions of the public over and over again and not using the results. I think developing, it would be great to see the EC develop structures for online engagement before and after engagement processes. I don't think we do enough with our participants. There's a lot of energy and motivation that could be used. I think it would be great to see an EU platform to facilitate and coordinate different types of engagement, and for the EC to fund different communities, community building across boundaries. It would be great to see clear requirements in EU-funded projects to feedback to participants. I think our lack of feedback is one of those areas where we often fail our participants at the moment. Encouraging the creation of public engagement units at universities and other research and innovation institutions. I know that this happens a lot in the Netherlands, it happens a lot in the UK. And of course, let's not forget to review reward and promotion schemes within higher education and research, because all too often there's no real benefit to a researcher to do public engagement. So we need to find ways of bringing people on board and making sure that this isn't just something for the most enthusiastic people, but that you can build a sound career within academia and engage the public at the same time. So these are some of the key concerns, the key areas of work that we wanted to look at. So that's our research, our findings. And at this stage, unless Marie-Louise, did you have anything you wanted to add at this juncture?
Not at this point, I think.
No?
I think, yeah, just...
Excellent. So now let's have a look at what support Engage2020 can provide you with. And now obviously I don't know how much experience you have of responsible research and innovation or public engagement, but we've provided a number of tools for people who are interested in it but not necessarily that experienced. So one example is the action catalog, which is a very useful tool. It has 57 different methods of engagement listed according to a number of criteria. So it's a searchable database. It allows you to find a method which is particularly suitable for your context, your type of participant, your issue, and your purpose. So we developed this using a very rigorous process. We had a call for examples and a questionnaire which went out, and we had over 200 responses. We then synthesized what we got in and found that we could group them in 57 examples. The Heinz number by pure chance. So we also have 57 varieties of engagement. We then tried to think about, well, what are some of the key questions that a person who's new to responsible research and innovation, what questions would they have when they come across a new method? Well, it might be things like, do I need to know a lot about IT? How much time do I need to have? How much money do I need to have? How many participants can I realistically use this method with? And we developed a number of criteria based on those questions, which we then assessed each method against. And these filled in fact sheets were then peer reviewed by other consortium members. So every single single method in this action catalog has been checked and checked again to make sure that it is an accurate depiction of the method's strengths and weaknesses. And we've then uploaded all of this onto an interactive online platform. Here's a picture. It's actioncatalog.eu, and all these 57 methods are now listed in this hexagonal structure. And if we have a moment later on, or now. Yeah, I think Marie is going to find the action catalog, because actually I think there's a real benefit in showing you it, because it is very, very interactive and it kind of reacts to what you do. So, for example, when we go here, if we decided, for example, that we wanted to if we wanted to do something around policy formation, whoa, all of a sudden these have changed, and the ones which are suitable for policy formation have become bigger and others have become smaller. Let's say we also wanted to consult people within policy formation. And once again, the size of the circles change and reflect that certain methods are good for consulting and good for policy, others one or the other. So if we're trying to reach citizens, once again, things change. Now, obviously, you can fill all of these questions in, but it's good to be quite measured. And then if you click on one, as citizens juries here, you can actually see much more information about what the method is good at, where it comes from, what other sources of information you might want to look at. And you can see here, is it suitable for CSOs? What's the time frame like? Does it require lots of IT knowledge? And some real examples which you can then click on and go further. So as you can see, this is a very comprehensive database. It really gives you a lot of information and and above all, I think, a different way of searching that information. So I think that's something that I'm very keen on people using. I think it's a very useful tool. So that's the action catalog. We also have a document called the e-anthology, which is it's an online tool. It's a toolkit. It's either as a PDF or an ebook, and it allows you to access all the information that Engage2020 has produced over 2.5 years in an interactive format. It's an entry point to the whole project in a sense. And it's specifically made to be useful if you're using a tablet or a phone or looking at it online. It's a digital toolkit which allows you to really browse, access more information, and explore what we've been researching in Engage2020. And that can be found on the Engage website. We've also got other results. We have one report on engagement methods and tools, one on practice policies and activities, one on the kind of theoretical background to public engagement, one on future policies, and one on the future of engagement methods, which is what this webinar is largely based on. So lots more information to take in, and I really encourage you to go and look at those reports. All of those reports and the e-anthology can be found on our website, engage2020.eu, under publications. So we've produced a tremendous amount of useful information, and I really encourage you to look at the e-anthology to get a handle on what's there, and of course also to go and check out the action catalog, which will really help you to find the right method for your context. So that's a little bit about the future of methods, a little bit about how we can support you going forward. But at this point, I would really welcome any questions or any thoughts you have around what we've discussed. What do you think? Do you agree with our findings? Do you have particular questions? Myself and Marie-Louise are here. I know we have Rainer from Dialogik and Henk from the University of Groningen who can help answer questions as well. So we have one question. Yeah. Yep. So from Ruth. So Ruth says, I'm working on an EU project called Enrich, Enhancing Responsible Research Innovation Curriculum in Higher Education. We're in the early stages. So wondering if anyone has experience in building awareness of RRI with higher education academics and students. Is there a repository of resources and expertise for this? Well, I think when it comes to the work at the university level, of course, you have the National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement in the UK, who've got a lot of UK-based case studies and examples. I think I'd also point you to RRI, the Project RRI tools. Marie-Louise, do you have any other good advice around particularly higher education academics and students?
I think the examples that you come with are quite good. There are several projects that have just been funded concerning this, and Rich is probably one of them. I think maybe Henk has some experience. How are you doing in Groningen? I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah. So what I can add is that I coordinated a project called RRI, and you can find its output on the Living Knowledge website. And has been one work package dealing with strategies in higher education institutes to do more collaborative research with civil society organizations. So that's I'll write the website link in the chat box.
Mm.
So.
Thank you. And we've also had a message in the chat suggesting the RRI project, HEIRRI. So that's another resource. Do what Henk is doing here. If you have good resources, make sure you post them, but also make sure you post them. Try to post them to everyone, so it's not just privately. So I'll send a few links out. So any other questions or any other comments, resources you'd like to share? So a question, will we share the presentation and where? I think we will put up the slides from the webinar. We can put
maybe also the recording.
Yeah, so we will definitely put slides up on the webinar page where you signed up.
No, on the website.
On the website, yes.
The Engage website.
The Engage website. There is on the news it says Engage webinars on the front page, and we will put presentations up there. We're also recording the presentation part of the webinars, and we will put those up if the sound quality is good enough. So there's a slight caveat there, but hopefully there will be sound recordings, hopefully, and you will definitely have the presentations up.
Maybe we can also just draw attention to, we have a sister project called PE2020, which is public engagement in Horizon 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And they are also they're also looking on how engagement is increasing, and some of these, so they have some resources that might be useful as well. Mm-hmm. And also, well, there's the MACES reports. Mm-hmm. It is a couple of years old, but they did map how engagement happened in, I think at that point we were at 27 countries in the EU. So they have mapped that, and that's some quite interesting things to see there. And I think that in the PE2020 project, they've also looked on what has been some of the more recent developments. And for example, in Finland, since the report came out, there was a great interest or increase in public engagement.
So we've had a few questions. Do you have any information about the growth of engagement requirements in the EU? I don't think there is any kind of academic evidence around how much it's growth, but what we can see certainly is an increase in the number of Horizon 2020 projects with a requirement or at least a preference for public engagement embedded in the project.
And this is different kinds. Some of it is concerning citizens, but there's also a lot more focus on stakeholder platforms, stakeholder dialogue when making a research project. So that has definitely been seen.
And we can also see that in many cases the fact that the EU is bringing this in means that we're suddenly seeing RRI related engagement in countries which have had virtually none. So areas where in the MACES report it says, well, there's almost no engagement. We now see that there is a growing experience with these methods, and in large part because of EU funding and EU requirements. A question here from Andrea. Do you have a map of respondents to your survey that could help map give a hand to this diffusion of public engagement? We don't have a map of the respondents, but I know that in tomorrow's webinar, we will be looking a lot more closely at the map of Europe and what the strengths and weaknesses are. I guess, not wanting to spoil the surprise, but we can clearly see that a lot of the most high performing, the countries which have a strong culture of science engagement tend to be in Northwest Europe. And there are some in Southern Europe. Eastern Europe tends to be less well developed. But also the MESA's report and the work of PE2020 is showing that there is a growth in even in countries that have little engagement. A question here about whether or not we can provide links. And Henk has provided a link to PE2020, which is great. So please, if you have other projects that people should be aware of, just post links, and we'll post links as we go along. So you say there were tendencies towards this going on beyond science and technology. The resources in your work include methods for humanities and social science research. I would say absolutely the methods. Actually, when we say that this is going on beyond science and technologies, we actually mean beyond the academic world and the university world. So you can see that a lot of participation is happening in local authorities, a lot of engagement is happening around health, around many different areas of public policy, and of course community engagement at the very local level. And I think there is a lot to learn from these fields, not least because they've been happening a lot. But many of the cases that we list in the action catalogue are very relevant to social sciences and humanities. So absolutely don't see this as a tool which is just intended for hard sciences or the like. Social sciences, humanities, this is also a very valid way of working.
Maybe also worth mentioning that there are 4 European projects focusing on different aspects of RRI, or Responsible Research and Innovation, that will have a joint conference in January. It's the Go4 conference, and the 4 projects behind that might also have some relevant resources. But could also, if you are very interested in responsible research and innovation, that might also be a place of interest for you.
Well, there's a lot, and also, once again, I'd say that the e-anthology also contains a lot of links and suggested methodologies. Henk or Rainer, do either of you have additional comments or questions, comments or ideas, resources that you would like to share with the participants? I think, one of the key messages from me around looking at the field of engagement around responsible research and innovation is that there's cause for optimism. I think a lot of the time, a lot of people I've met can feel quite despondent. They don't feel like it's going fast enough. But if we take a slightly longer time perspective, it's very clear that over the last 10 years, a lot has happened. And there are a lot of developments. And of course, we have a long way to go yet. But it is clear that we are further along the lines of people being aware of public engagement, societal engagement, and there is a wider use of the methods. And above all, there are pockets of very good practice across Europe. And the challenge now is to take these divided communities and actually create something which brings them together. So these are some really, I think, important issues that need to be addressed. Marie-Louise, do you have anything else? No, I think Marie-Louise is busy finding us some very useful links. Can I check? Is there anyone else got any more questions about the area? And please just put them down as in the chat box. Okay. Well, I can't see any more questions. So unless there are any ones coming in, I think we've covered a lot in an hour. There's a lot more I have to say there's a lot more of information than we were able to cover in the reports. So if you're interested in this future focused area, then I would recommend you have a look at the last two reports here, because they cover these questions about the future. But also, of course, don't forget that there are lots of really useful information in the anthology and in the action catalog. So I think with that, I think the only thing left for me to do is to say a big thank you to you all for participating, and to make a shameless plug for the final webinar in our series at Engage2020, which is tomorrow, 1 to 2 Central European Time, broadening and deepening mainstreaming public engagement. So this is especially relevant for those of you who work in a large institution and want to understand what your institution can do to support this way of working. And once again, we'll make the slides available and we'll record it as well. So even if you can't take part in it, there'll be ways of accessing the information. So I don't know, is the sign up for the webinar, that webinar closed?
It might be. Otherwise, just write us an email at contact@engage.eu, and we will make sure that you get a room.
So don't be discouraged if you can't access it, because there's a lot of we will make sure that you can access the webinar if you want it. So thank you all so much for taking part. It's been fun. It's good to be able to disseminate the information. I'm very pleased to see the high level of interest. Anything to add, Marie-Louise, that I've forgotten?
No, I don't think so.
Excellent.
No, I hope to see some of you tomorrow, and otherwise sometime in the future. And
yeah, absolutely.
Don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions or similar.
No, absolutely. I mean, Engage2020 is drawing to a close, but of course, all of us in the consortium are still working with these questions, and we're very happy to answer questions and help people navigate this field. You don't need to start from scratch. There is lots of support out there. So the key thing is to ask for it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.